Welcome to this council meeting. I'll just open with karakia. E te whānau o te kaunihera o te aureri, whiata Mautaranga, kia marama, kia whai take, kia whai mahi katoa, tū mai te kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou e tātou katoa, tihei mauri ora. We have apologies for lateness from Celia, Councillor Butler and Councillor Tufnell. Do we have any other apologies? I think other than that, we're all present.
My understanding is Councillor Tufnell will be on Zoom.
Yes.
He's not well.
That's right.
And he was heading home from a meeting we had earlier.
Yeah, no, good as gold. So, Councillor McNamara, thank you. Move Councillor McNamara, seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Declarations of interest. Anything, Councillor Mailing?
Confidential items, I will declare an interest and we'll leave the room.
Okay, thank you.
The one in relation to, I think it's called the ferry service.
Mapua Ferry.
Mapua Ventures. Yep.
Okay, thank you. That'll be noted. Right, so we have quite a number of minutes to work through. So the first up is the full council meeting on the 19th of May. Someone move. Move Councillor Ogilvie, seconded Councillor McKenzie. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Special full council 26th of May. Move Councillor Bryant, seconded Councillor Mailing. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Special full council 16th of June. Move Councillor Ogilvie, seconded Councillor Turley. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Full council on the 23rd of June. Councillor Ogilvie moves, seconded Councillor McKenzie. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Full council the 30th of June. Move Councillor Bryant, seconded Councillor Dowler. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And then special full council 15th of July. Move Councillor Mailing, seconded Councillor Hill. All those in favour, please say aye. Mailing. Against, carried. Thank you. Right, so the first report we've got, Chief Executive Interregnum Period Powers. Jenny, this is in your name. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Council and the Chair. Most councils at this time of year will be checking that their CE has sufficient delegations for the period between the existing council being discharged and the new council being sworn in and able to act. So if the delegations aren't already in place, then they'll be seeking a resolution from council for extra powers. And this is simply for urgent matters in that short period between the councils. Elections day is the 8th of October. Final results have to be declared under the Act by the 19th of October. Often it's a little bit earlier than that if there's no recount or delays. And then we're preparing for a swearing-in ceremony on the 27th of October. So we're literally talking about possibly a couple of weeks here when these extra powers will apply. And then there is a report back mechanism to council if for any reason there's been a need to use them. And the only example I can really think of is perhaps a tender process where there's a contract award that needs to happen in that period, something like that. But otherwise, I'll take the report as read and happy to take questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to move. Thank you. It's been moved, Councillor Bryant, seconded Councillor Mailing, and open for questions or comments. Councillor Hill.
I guess it's pretty obvious what urgent would mean and what the criteria would be that establishes that some matter is urgent.
Well, there are extensive powers that the CE has already in the delegations register. So this would be above, say, the financial delegation of the CE, which is $1 million. So if there was something that exceeded that amount that would normally come to council, so just decisions that would normally come to council that have to be made in that period because of urgency. I mean, if there was a civil defence or something like that issue, then there are certain powers under that legislation anyway that might kick in for that sort of thing. So it's those sorts of situations, and it is in consultation with the mayor-elect that there would be a discussion. So it's not frequently used, but it's best to have in place. Yeah.
So urgent would be, in respect of urgent matters, would be something that has to be dealt with before the new council's sworn in. It absolutely has to be. There's a definitive date of.
That's correct.
I'm assuming that's just you know. I mean, I don't have an issue with this at all, really. But I did think, I wonder if we, you know, what's is it a simple thing to define urgent? Yep.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, through Mr. Chair. Mayor. So historically, have we had to use, like obviously this is put in place after every triennium ends and between the next one being sworn in, how many transactions would have happened to have transpired over that short period where that delegation's in place?
I can't speak for Tasman because I've only been here since February, but the example I gave of a tender process and contract award is something that I've experienced before at another council, just the timing of it, that it fell in that period and needed to be a decision made at that point.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any further comments or questions? If not, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, next item, Waimea Water Limited Statement of Intent. Mike, this is under your name. Welcome.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is a relatively straightforward matter for council. The draft statement of intent has been reviewed by council. It went back to Will with no substantive changes required. This final statement of intent has been updated for the cost increases that were advised to us recently. And the staff recommendation is to agree to the statement of intent. This is a shareholder matter, and I have no feedback from Waimea Irrigators Limited indicating they are unhappy with the final statement of intent, and indeed they were happy with the draft statement of intent. Quite happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Open for questions. Councillor McNamara.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, I've got a couple of questions about the content, which aren't necessarily for Mike, but we have a revised dam break analysis prepare emergency action plan that is complete. Have we seen that?
That document has not been provided to shareholders. The company engages with the community in that regard.
I think it would be prudent for us to at least view it. And another question, the 9.3 note, 9.3 note to risks. I don't see in there a risk of it not holding water, which I would have thought was a substantial risk. So I do wonder why that's not listed. Finally, I guess this one is to Mike. If this was published on their website 28th of June or 30th of June, I'm wondering why it's taking this long for us to approve it.
That has just been timing to prepare the staff report and timing of council meetings.
It does seem a reasonably long length of time.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of actions out of the questions raised by Councillor McNamara, I presume the dam break stuff, given that's in consultation with the community, can be circulated. There shouldn't be any issue with that.
Yes, that can be an action point for the meeting I undertake to circulate the information to councillors.
Cool, thank you. So I've got, just to be clear, Councillor Mailing, Councillor Turley, Councillor Greening. So Councillor Mailing.
Yep, I'm happy to move this. I just want them to get on with the project and finish it. Sooner the better. And I'm happy to move it. Let's get the project completed, and I'll reserve my right of reply for later.
Okay.
Yes, I'm just wondering with the engagement with the community, my understanding is that there has been some engagement with those in the Lee Valley, but that's not the whole community that could be affected. So I'm just wondering what process Waimea Water are going to do. I have asked this question before and I've been told it's going to happen, but the question is when.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm unable to answer the councillor's question, but I can take the matter up with Mike Scott, will be noted in the minutes.
And I think you can provide the answer in terms of the process alongside circulating the information requested by Councillor McNamara previously. Thank you. Councillor Greening.
Thank you very much. Just 4 questions. Just following up on the earlier line, I recall Mr. Scott briefing us that they were updating their emergency action plan. So perhaps that could be followed up as to where that is. My question just relate more for the benefit of the public, because I imagine there are some elements in this SOI that they may not necessarily completely understand. So one of the matters in the SOI is the water charges that are coming up. This is on page 30 and 36 of the agenda, useful table on 36. I was wondering if staff could just briefly explain how those water charges will be split between TDC and the other shareholders, and also just noting the numbers between the financial year 23 and 25 and an explanation of how that's increasing or what's happening there. That's my first question.
Through Mr. Mayor, the table on page 36 on diligent for operating cash flows, the operating costs are split 51-49, so council picks up 51% of the operating costs and irrigators pick up 49% of the operating costs. The delay to the completion of the dam means that operating costs will come into effect later than otherwise would have been the case. It's been built into the budgets. With the financing costs are covered within the water augmentation agreements. So for debt that sits on Waimea Water Limited's books, so that's the CIIL funding, and the shareholder advances servicing the interest on those loans flows back through the water augmentation agreements. So the irrigators goes back to Will and their shareholders pay as part of their annual charges. And the ones that flow back through council are recovered through rates and development contributions and other aspects of council funding. So that's how those costs are allocated. Council has undertaken to meet some of the irrigator capacity financing costs in our annual plan for this year, and it's meeting interest costs on its circa $10 million worth of irrigator capacity funding as part of the LTP out until 2026. I trust that answers the councillor's question.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Greening's second question.
Well, I just wanted to get some clarity, because people were looking at the water charges line and going, oh, 1.3, 2.9, 4.6, and just wondering why there is an increase there and what portion will be paid by TDC.
So that's just what Mike answered. That's exactly the answer that you just received.
Yeah. Well, I can understand it, but I'm sure the public didn't maybe grab the fact that 51% of OPEX, 51% of all charges is coming our way, but it's okay. contractor dispute, which is highlighted on page 35, is Mike able now to disclose what they are seeking in terms of contractor disputes? And will the legal expenses in defending any dispute, how will those expenses be split between the parties in terms of TDC and the other shareholders?
Mike.
I am unable to comment at this time, Mr. Mayor, on any progress or otherwise with contractor disputes. I'm not privy to the information that Waimea Water Limited has and the engagement that's currently going on. In terms of legal costs surrounding any dispute, they are project costs and they are covered by or be included in the project budget, and they'll be funded as are the other costs for the dam.
So again, that would be 51-49 X splits?
That would be correct.
Third question, directors' fees also on 36. I imagine some people are a bit bemused by the numbers that are there, which is 13K, 2023, 81, 150. Perhaps you could just explain why those numbers are initially so low at the start and why they're so much higher at the end.
Through Mr. Mayor, just took me a moment and some advice. It's because the directors' fees are currently being capitalised as part of the project cost. Once you come into operations, then the directors' fees are part of the operational cost. So there's no significant movement in directors' fees. It's simply the way in which they're classified.
Good answer. Thank you very much. And finally, just a general question. It's more for my benefit and probably the public, but does the staff have any concerns or issues with the SOI?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, staff have no concerns with the SOI. It meets the statutory requirements. It provides good information for the public and for councillors.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Councillor Turley, then Councillor McKenzie.
Just for some clarification, you say that council's meeting some of the costs of the irrigators. I'm sort of aware of that, but I was just wondering what the process for that is, and are they going to be paying that back later when they've established their units more and they're making great profit that we've been told they will do?
No, those costs are being met by, I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, those costs are being met by council. They're not a loan to irrigators, so there's no payment in the future. Council resolved as part of its long-term plan to fund interest on irrigator capacity on $10 million worth of borrowing out to the end of 2026 financial year. And as part of our annual plan for this year, you further resolved to fund some of the cost overruns, the irrigator capacity interest. You're transferring those funds out of the council's enterprise activity, primarily from forestry. Those funds will be paid to Waimea Water, obviously, to be able to allow them to meet their obligations under the loans, but they're not repayable by irrigators, even though they relate to irrigator capacity.
So are we setting a precedent here? That's my concern going forward for the cost overruns. You know, council ratepayers can't keep covering the costs of the irrigators. So is there any movement there or any agreement as what will happen in the future?
We're currently in conversations and negotiations over the current round of cost increases. It's unlikely that more will be added to the council balance sheet, but I can't foreshadow the outcome of those negotiations.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie indicated she doesn't wish, no, all good. So it's been moved and seconded in terms of the receipt of the statement of intent. I will put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Mike, the next report's also under your name. Statement of intent for the LGFA. Final. Over to you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a largely routine decision matter. Council is represented on the LGFA's Shareholder Council by myself. The LGFA Shareholder Council reviews and provides feedback on the draft statement of intent, and they fully support the final statement of intent. I'm happy to take questions, but as I say, it's a relatively routine matter.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Bryant, and then Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just one question, Mike. Does this vary a lot from previous statements of intents or just some minor tweaking? Because we've seen this a few times now, I think.
No, by and large, the LGFA is moving forward. There's very much a business as usual approach. The most recent changes for the LGFA was the shareholders permitting borrowing by CCOs directly from the LGFA. There are a very small number of councils taking advantage of that, but it's relatively early days. That's the only significant change in terms of the business of the LGFA.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the resolutions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bryant. Is there a seconder before I come to Councillor McNamara, or at least Councillor McNamara is happy to second? Thank you. Councillor McNamara.
Thank you. So, given the significant burden that Three Waters has been, is the LGFA entitled to no worse off funding?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no.
Seems extraordinary. Again, you described this as a routine matter. Is that why, again, 30th of June to mid-August or 11th of August, delays in us getting there because apparently they want feedback, so it does seem extraordinary length of time again.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in my view, it's not an extraordinary length of time. We received the final statements of intent. We received them on the 30th of June, which is by the statutory deadline, and before council within 4 to 5 weeks, given the lead time for council papers and the need to analyse the final statements of intent. I don't consider the time frame that staff have taken as disproportionately long. There is typically not feedback on the final statements of intent because the conversations that have occurred about the contents of statements of intent have happened through the statement of expectations process and the feedback on the draft statements of intent.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Are you happy to second? Oh, yes. Okay. So move Councillor Bryant, seconded Councillor McNamara. Are there any further? Councillor Butler.
Thank you.
Through the chair. Yeah, so I think it's great that the LGFA are moving towards, their climate change, supporting emissions reductions in council projects. Could you just remind me whether or not the LGFA lends for specific projects for councils, or whether it is a loan that is not attached to a specific project?
Through Mr. Mayor, that is a council choice. So, for example, this council funds its balance sheet as a whole. We don't identify individual projects we're funding from the LGFA. We could, right, as we've done with the Waimea Dam, to say I want a specific piece of funding for a specific project. Wellington City, I understand, has done that in relation to a green project. They've identified it, they've specifically borrowed for it, and they've taken advantage of the slight reduction in interest rates as a result.
Right, okay. So when Nelson City Council voted against the holding company, on the base, some of the councillors on the basis that the LGFA was not supporting emissions reduction projects sufficiently. Was that a reasonable stand for them to take? My understanding is that, from reading the statement of intent, that the LGFA actually does take care that their loans do go to emissions reductions projects, but it would be just good to have a comment on that. Thank you.
So the LGFA board, and certainly the LGFA Shareholders Council, is well aware of the pressures that council are under and the need to fund responses to climate change and to have a green, I suppose, tinge to those funding mechanisms. So at the moment, the LGFA is building a sufficient book of green loans to councils, so you potentially can issue green bonds. And so they've got some quite onerous conditions and reporting requirements around them, but they want to be in that space because they need to be in that space to attract additional funds moving forward. So they're very positive about that. How the funds from the LGFA are actually used is a decision for the councils that are borrowing from the LGFA. And I believe that most councils will be working in that space and using funding from the LGFA as part of their normal council business, which is to address some of those negative impacts of climate change.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor McNamara.
Yeah, thank you. Just wondering, do we have a breakdown of the amount of money that is loaned out through the LGFA to like CCOs, for example, like what we were attempting to do with the port company, or through the dam, or however we do it?
The split in that funding has not been reported. My understanding is that CCO funding is in its very early days, and that by the vast majority of LGFA funds are flowing to councils.
Will there be provision in future to disclose that kind of information?
There will be, it's likely to be disclosed, probably in aggregate, but not in individual CCOs, because those arrangements would be the commercial sensitivity around them. But certainly I would expect to see in the quarterly report comment on the level of lending to CCOs.
Thank you. I mean, I think that's the feedback I would like to provide them, as I'd like to see it, and through you, passed down to us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Mike's got a note of that. Thank you, Councillor McNamara. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the three waters, the statement that at this point in time we're unsure as to any role by LGFA in lending to the water service entities once they've been established. How or when will that become known? It's a bit hard to ask you that, isn't it? But what can you imagine might be a process whereby that becomes more known, or a sort of timing around that?
Through Mr. Mayor. At the moment, there is engagement, obviously, between the Department of Internal Affairs and the LGFA over funding in relation to Three Waters, because a significant amount of council borrowing relates to Three Waters activities. And if the Three Waters reforms proceed, then that debt would be repaid and it would go off the LGFA books. So the LGFA have confirmed that the loss of that piece of their lending book won't cause them any particular difficulties in terms of them not having a critical size in order to engage and raise funds. At this stage, it is unclear whether or not they will have a role, depending on the way in which the government chooses to support the Three Waters entities. They may be able to borrow at the same rates that the LGFA can borrow. So remember, the LGFA has a government support which assists it in getting its credit rating up to the AAA, the same as the government. Therefore, it borrows at the same rates. The expectation is the Three Waters entities will be able to achieve the same credit rating, and then they would borrow at the same rate as the LGFA. But that's a matter that is still a work in progress. I would hope over the next 6 to 9 months it'll become much clearer on those transitional arrangements. Remember, we've got the second bill coming up that will have the transitional arrangements, and it may well be clear in those what role, if any, the LGFA will have. If the Three Waters entities could borrow from the LGFA, it would make managing the current council debt in relation to the Three Waters activities perhaps easier to balance, because you would be able to say, well, we can transfer our debt in relation to the Three Waters entities from one LGFA member, Tasman District Council, over to another LGFA member, Three Waters entity. But there are quite some barriers to the LGFA lending to the Three Waters entities, principally the joint and several guarantee. So all of the members of the LGFA borrowing any significant amount over $20 million are required to sign the joint and several guarantee. So we guarantee the LGFA for any default that they might have as a result of being unable to meet their obligations. What typically happens, that would have to arise out of a council or councils defaulting on their obligations to the local government funding agency. And under the security arrangements we have, including our own debenture trust deed, there's the ability to put targeted rate on effectively. So a council would need to fail, and a council or councils would have to be big enough to cause the LGFA to fail, to cause the guarantee to be caught. So local government entities are pretty comfortable with that structure. You bring in a Three Waters entity, which is a lot different than a territorial authority or a regional council. To lend to them, the LGFA would have to have the approval of all the existing shareholders. And so that is like to be a significant barrier, because it may change the risk profile that we face in terms of the likelihood of that joint and several liability being called.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
And so the bill coming up will detail to some decent degree the transition arrangements for debt and asset.
So not the current bill.
No,
the next one.
Bill coming up. Yeah.
Whenever that may.
Yeah.
I am hopeful, as we don't know the exact contents of that bill, that in those transitional arrangements it will become clear what role, if any, the LGFA has in the funding of the Three Waters entities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Mailing.
I'd just like to speak in support of this. The LGFA has been one of the biggest success stories in local government in the time that I've been around. And I remember, I think it was 2012, when we were one of the founding councils. And it's just been, instead of having to go to banks and deal commercially, it's just been a tremendous success. And I think one of the best things that's ever happened in local government in the last 30 odd years, to be honest. And long may it continue.
Thank you, Councillor Mailing. It's been moved and seconded. If there is nothing further, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, the next item is the Civil Defence CDM terms of reference. There's a recommendation contained on page 68. Someone prepared to move? It's pretty straightforward. Move Councillor Walker, seconded Councillor Ogilvie. Are there any questions? Councillor Bryant.
Who am I asking?
Me.
Oh, you. That's even more. Currently, it shows that 2 members will be the mayors, but not the deputy mayors, but the deputy mayors are 10. So I just wonder why they're not part of the actual elected members.
Because I think it's just the statutory.
It's a statutory requirement.
Yeah. In terms of the statutory setup, but the deputy mayors do attend.
Yes.
So, but the voting members, my understanding, are other.
So it limits the people that can move in second motions.
It does.
Yeah, so it seems a little
look, there's every possibility that the whole structure under civil defence is going to change along, because amongst the many very high profile reforms that are currently underway, one of the many other reforms which is working its way through central government is something called Trifecta, which is a review of the whole civil defence emergency management system structure process. So is because it's been lost in the, plethora of other much more substantial and controversial reforms. So yeah, that may change in the future. And one again, like so much reform, one of the key areas of focus is around iwi representation, input and influence into the civil defence management system, and so that is likely to come through in the future. Councillor McNamara.
Surely they're not going to remove more about now. So I'm assuming that Nelson City Council have the same lead times that we do, which makes it equally or even more extraordinary that they approved it on the 10th of May and we are getting it on the 11th of August.
Yeah, point noted. I think there just was some confusion in the communication around timing. So I'll put my hand up. My fault, should have followed that up. That was obviously a recommendation coming through from the CDM meeting, and we've just been slightly slower to implement it than Nelson City Council were. So apologies, Councillor Hill.
In your experience, this works. This generally works. How things are.
Yeah, I think generally the civil defence, the CDM meetings. So there's a number of components to it. So there's the KEG process, which is kind of at a operational staff related level, and then this is the governance level. I think it's worked pretty well. Like I say, it's like so many other things. Despite the fact it has worked, central government has decided that it needs to change, and so they're working through that process currently. And yeah, we'll just wait and see where that ends up. Councillor Ogilvie.
Just following on from that, with I suppose climate change and some of the events of the last 4 or 5 years even, is there any move to recognise that in terms of emergency management at all, or is that really part of what you're talking about, a future piece of legislation?
It is, yeah, absolutely. So all of those issues, all of the above comments in terms of both climate change and the scale, number, timing of events, be they flooding or otherwise, particularly flooding, is at least part of the reason for the trifecta review. And again, I guess it probably won't come as any great surprise. The whole discussion about what's done regionally, what's done centrally, how that relationship works is forming part of that conversation, as well as is the contribution, the process contribution and recognition of the iwi input into civil defence at those various levels as well, so both nationally and regionally.
Thank you.
Is there anything further? If not, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, the next item. Where are we? 10 o'clock. So the resident satisfaction survey. Alan and Neil, welcome. Neil, you're leading the conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll take the report as read and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to continue my theme for the day, this survey was carried out in May 2022. I'm wondering about, firstly, how long it takes to get to us, and secondly, about the timing of the survey, given that this is information that probably would be most useful leading into a annual plan, long-term plan discussion around how we spend our money. And yet we're getting it after we've just passed it, and probably most of us won't remember it by the time we get to the next plan. So I'm just wondering, could something be done about that?
Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have traditionally, over many years, carried out the survey in May, and so I guess one of the ways of giving consistency of results is to carry out at the same time of year. So that's one of the reasons that we do that. The other reason we do it in May is that a lot of the many of the results are used to inform the annual report, and so yeah, we bring that, obviously, that's for the 20, in this case, the 21-22 year. So in May, that's a good opportunity for us to look at that July to end of June year and bring the results through to the annual report. So that's why the timing is as it is. Certainly, you know, if councillors want us to make this information more available or available again as part of an annual plan, our annual or LTP process, I'm sure that we could arrange to do that and, you know, and bring that into that conversation too.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder, obviously we spend an extraordinary amount of money doing it, as to its usefulness. Like, it's a feel-good thing in our annual report or whatever, I guess, but as far as actually being more useful to process, Dwayne?
The two plans.
Dwayne, I presume you also want to make a comment. Yeah. I was going to do that, Dwayne, but you know, you jumped up so quickly. I thought there's definitely something you want to add. So, but.
And I'm sure that Dwayne will be able to add more to this. Look, this is we do this each year at this time because it is one of our KPIs under the annual plan to do this. So this does inform the report. This doesn't sit on the shelf. So this will actually feed into the annual plan for this year. Noting we've already started that. So we pick up on some of the areas that we need to perhaps improve on and lift our game, and we'll bring that back to council to perhaps invest further and maybe into an area. Now, roads and footpaths is always one that comes through, although I think we did quite well on that space. So it's quite normal for a council to do it this time, and it is definitely not a feel-good thing. It's definitely something we take. I mean, I'll just point out, you know, some of the things in here that's, you know, bureaucratic and hard to deal with. Conversely, some people say we're very approachable. So we need to dig into that and find out exactly what areas we could improve. And that may require staff training or investment or so forth. But this is quite common for a council to do this at this time of the year.
Dwayne, do you want to add anything?
Actually, the Chief Executive covered it. I just point out that in terms of the timing, the survey is undertaken in May, but then it needs to be compiled by the surveyor in June. We receive the information in July. You're getting it now. So, you know, when you look through that sequence of events, it's pretty timely. And I would just stress that it does actually help inform planning for the forthcoming year. So which typically starts around now. So the timing is actually quite useful.
Okay, thank you for the explanation from all those who have made a comment, Councillor McNamara and Councillor Hill.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just in terms of process, just because council's always done something one way, I don't necessarily think that's an excuse as why we should continue to do it that way, but I accept your explanations. And so from what I gleaned from the satisfaction survey, we can expect to see a lot more money spent in Murchison in the coming year, because they seem to be quite an unhappy bunch down there in terms of recycling and footpaths and things. And I was at Ngaramoti last night, and again, I can tell you that the satisfaction is very low there in terms of the recycling, because there is none. So, yes, looking forward to that discussion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McNamara. Councillor Hill.
Just as a general comment, the results of the survey, are they particularly surprising in terms of the areas that council staff, and probably us, would pick as being areas of least satisfaction or things that are going well? Because is there much of a mismatch in what our thinking is generally and what we're planning for in some areas comparable to what's coming through today? I know we've got last year's and the years before to look at, but
in terms of Section 5, those kind of things that are materially different from previous years, it might be, on the surface, it would appear that some of the COVID restrictions we put around, the way the council does business might influence things like the way we consult with the public, community programs and events, and even the service you receive when you're contacting council services. But I do note that COVID was in the year prior as well. And so these trends are against the year when also we had lockdown and COVID. It might represent to some extent people's tolerance for that sort of thing is waning over time. I'd probably just mention, I believe that there are some indicators nationwide, and I'll probably defer to Alan and Neil to talk about those, where we're seeing a local government trend in dissatisfaction, and I'll probably defer to them to talk about that. And in terms of the solid waste, I don't know. I'm sorry. I would refer to Richard on that.
Yeah, just to follow on what Dwayne was saying, we received a brief one-page summary from the research company before, unfortunately, after the report was done. But yeah, it has shown that dissatisfaction with councils has generally trended quite significantly down over the past year on a public consultation, and I've said this in the report as well, is quite far down nationwide.
Just looking, thank you, and looking at the section on services and facilities, and say, as an example, satisfaction with public halls and community buildings or residents. And then underneath that, there's some comments around the most common reasons for dissatisfaction, but that respondents didn't use them. Vaccine requirements, and they're a waste of public money. And specific comments around public halls and community buildings were old, cold, and needed maintenance. Some said that our public toilets need upgrades, are unclean, or that there are none in their area. Is any of that surprising, or do we have in our minds that actually some of our community buildings are old, cold, and need maintaining? We know that, and are we tracking towards improvements in terms of toilets needing cleaning or upgrading? Is that how we're thinking about some of our public toilets? Just wanting to get a sense of if there's a, if we're reading this and going, yeah, we know that, and we need to do something about it, or we are doing something about it, but it's next year, or.
Through the chair, I mean, I guess one of the things to note around section 6, where the facilities are talked about, is we actually hit our satisfaction measures for the most part. I guess the question is a kind of a longer term one, which is, do you want to raise your levels of service for those? Because at the moment we appear to be hitting the mark for most of these, or very close to the levels of service targets that council has set itself. In terms of upgrading longer term, well, that might be something we need to turn our mind to, and as part of the long-term plan process. But at the moment, I think we've just, our current program will be based on meeting the satisfaction requirements, and we're pretty close to doing that, if not totally.
So these specific comments might be outliers, you think, where someone or a few people are thinking the toilets are a bit shite.
Yeah, well, the purpose of the comments was to highlight where we don't get 100% satisfaction, what people are disliking about the service, and they're just to provide some richer context to the results. They don't necessarily indicate the council's not meeting the targets it set itself.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mayling and Councillor Greening. Yeah, I got it.
Well, just a couple of quick questions that are actually directed at the CEO, so questions for her really. But the first one is a comment in relation to the roads. For that to go up 9%, I think is a bit unusual if we think of some of the problems that we've had with roads. So I thought that was a bit of an outlier because, I get complaints, and I know when you go to the rural areas, we certainly get a hard time because there's never enough money to spend on roads. So I thought that was unusual. But the question for the CEO is there any immediate action for you and your team to take as a result of this survey going forward?
Through the chair, yes, there are. We look at these results. We look at all the comments. So behind this is a lot of comments. We look at the themes, and one of the things that I'm very keen to improve is our general service, customer service. So making sure we're responding to complaints, making sure we improve our processes so it's more easy to do business with. So those are the sort of things that I'm mostly interested in. In terms of the actual satisfaction levels, it's quite often the higher you want the satisfaction, quite often that means more money. So that's the sort of thing that might inform the annual plan for this year. We might say, actually, we really need to uplift this area. And a good example, it might be our halls. We might say, actually, we've had quite a bit of feedback. We may want to increase that level of satisfaction. But again, when you do that, that is a cost. So, so there are quite a few things that weave into our planning for the year. So no, this certainly doesn't sit on the shelf. This is our biggest read on what the community would like and would like to improve or are happy with. Roads.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mailing. Councillor Greening. So I've got Councillor Greening, Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Walker, Councillor McNamara, Councillor Ogilvie.
Yeah, so if I can just follow up on a few of the themes and then just a general observation. First of all, I do support the observation made by Councillor McNamara that I think it would be useful to shift it a little bit more forward to be useful for our planning. The survey sample is only 4%, so not significant, and I really don't see a shift in timing affecting any consistency or survey results. So I would hope that Council take on board the fact that it would be much more useful that this is aligned to the LTP rather than what appears to be aligned for an election period. I did find page 86, the diagram there, quite an interesting read. And look forward to seeing the next survey a shift if there is any, but it would have been useful also to see if there was a shift in this from a previous year, because it's not apparent in that diagram, but it's certainly a very useful diagram. Certainly highlights where the discontent is. An observation was made about toilets, and I just want to make the comment that not only is upgrading toilets on people's minds, but I imagine as we grow our more older population, availability will also be an issue. And again, I want to emphasise, because I'm not seeing it at the moment, council being more agile and cost effective in its toilet solutions. We've raised this in the past, but I would like to see council utilising more cost effective toilets, the container toilets that are out on the market. We've directed it to, well, we've pointed out several times to staff that there are really good toilets out there that are coming in at about 10K compared to what is budgeted, which is usually 180K. These container toilets are agile, so when we have coastal flooding, they're very easy to pick up and move, unlike a $180,000 toilet, which basically gets knocked over, has been the experience in the past. So I just want to emphasise that I would like to see more agile application and more cost-effective toilets so that we can increase the availability for what is clearly going to be a growing older population in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess it's really important that we are accountable to our ratepayers in our communities, and you will know this, Leonie, but I would caution against throwing out the measurement model that you use in terms of the annual report, because that is the mechanism that really delivers on the accountability, and having that historical time series of data and then good logic into thinking how you do measure is really, really important. So I would caution against that. I found the benchmarking data actually really interesting, and I couldn't help but think that if we provided more shared services to Nelson City, that would have a really positive impact on lifting their ratepayers' level of satisfaction.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at page 76 on the methodology section, and I note that 248 landlines were used as opposed to 152. And I just do wonder, and this is a question to staff, where do we get our numbers from? Because we state in 4.4 that research first used a quota system to ensure the sample indicated a range of respondents. And I just actually wonder, where do you get the cell phone numbers from? And I don't know how many people around this table still have a landline, but that's kind of something out of, yeah, I can see your hand, Councillor Downer. But I just wonder, how do we capture the breadth of what our community actually looks like? Because I sat in a workshop the other day where our youth made it very clear their voice is not getting captured and heard. And I look at these statistics and I am a little concerned around where is the entire voice community, and are we actually just targeting the same demographic every time we do this survey? That's my first question.
Neil, Alan.
Yeah, so that's definitely something that I can speak to the researcher company about. It's not specifically something that I specifically know about, but we can get some more information on that.
Maybe I could help, Mr. Mayor. When they rang us, I said I couldn't really do it. They said, well, do you know any mobile numbers that we could ring?
Yeah, interesting. I did wonder how you get people's mobile numbers, because they're not listed generally on.
I'm not exactly sure how they get them, but they do have a database of mobile numbers. And again, just to note that we changed the methodology for the survey, not this time, but the previous time, to bring cell phones in for the first time. So before that, we were only using landlines. So we have made that change in the last couple of years.
Through the memo said that sorry, to answer your question around representation though, they've got some key demographics they try to hit to make sure that they hit enough people of different ethnicities, ages, genders, to make sure that the sample is reasonably representative of the makeup of our community. So they do try to do that. In fact, that is why, for example, we have had feedback from some people where they are overfill on a particular demographic. They keep chasing it, and the surveyor has said, "Thank you very much. We don't need further information from this particular demographic." And we've had some negative feedback about that, but that's the reason why. Yeah.
So if I may,
yes.
A little bit concerned about the consistency, because I wasn't aware that you changed that last time on how we went about that. Anyway, when it comes to the wharepaku, I am, so on Facebook I got a message about the poor service within 2 areas in Motueka, and having quite frequently use those myself. I was able to do a service request, and the prompt action that our staff gave was phenomenal, like the same day and the following day for the second block of toilets. So when I look at these statistics, I kind of go, how much of our community knows if there's something wrong with our current service level that it takes a service request? So I guess I'm saying to our survey team, do we do education around some of these things can be addressed as simple as a service request? I'm sure Councillor Walker's name didn't make that happen any sooner than Mary Jane on the corner.
Through the chair, I think that's not a question best directed at the policy team, possibly better directed at, oh, actually, sorry, it is me. With my acting hat on for a moment as Group Manager, Customer Service, apologies. I'll take that up with the communications team and find out and come back to you. Apologies.
Good work, Dwayne. So, Richard.
Can I just add that this survey here, we kind of think it's just from the previous 12 months, and I am aware that some people might have had a bad experience 3 or 4 years ago, and they comment on that as well. So we've got to be very careful that we don't become objective about this. It's actually quite subjective, and it gives us trends rather than absolutes, and I think we just need to bear that one in mind.
Yeah, look, I think anything like this that surveys a small proportion of people, despite all of the effort that people go to get the demographics and all the rest of it, is only a source of information. It's a useful source of information. It's comparable, but it is one of the sources of information that we need to use, and it does identify some key things. And I'm sure all of us, there'll be some things we just go, yeah, well, that's it's kind of information that we get from our communities, whether it's community meetings or people we talk to or other ways. Others might come as a bit more of a surprise. But yeah, I think we have to ensure that we do keep this in context with everything else that we know and learn and hear, rather than necessarily just react to this particular bit of information. Right, Councillor McNamara. So Councillor McNamara, Councillor Ogilvie, Councillor Turley.
Yes. So just on that note, I do note that our contractor has employed a grader driver in Murchison, which should help with the roadie satisfaction down there, hopefully. But I do wonder, because of the slightly confused way that the public views things, how much of the roading dissatisfaction was due to state highways that we constantly seem to be having in a state of disrepair. So I don't know how we could distinguish that versus our own roading network. And I do note that the Wongamoas was closed just recently, which again highlights the importance of the southern link beyond Murchison that we complained about the other day.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I don't know if there's something to take on. We were at Murchison the other day. Roading was a key issue, both ours and the state highway. And obviously in the state highway's case, there's a couple of quite significant issues that particularly impact on the Murchison community, but they actually impact on a lot of other people if they're not addressed. So, Neil?
Yeah, I'll note that the survey doesn't actually differentiate between state highways and our own roads, so that's definitely something that we can note in the next survey.
Through the chair, it does come through in the comments though, often that people provide, because they provide an opportunity to say what their particular issue is, and I think through that, I'm pretty sure that comes through to staff, and they get to see some of the richer context around some of the results. And I guess it's also the trend that matters as much as the individual year's results.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ogilvie.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was actually quite impressed with Dwayne's sidestepping and swerving a few minutes ago. It could be useful in South Africa on Saturday night, perhaps. But seriously, I've been critical of the whole survey system and the 4%, et cetera, in previous years. But I think this is very detailed and quite comprehensive and covers a lot of information important to council and to the future council. I'm going to suggest that perhaps we ought to give a copy of this either in a meeting like this or individually to the new council once they have got through the election process. Because it would just help them and help the staff as well, and it's almost a form of induction, perhaps.
I was just going to suggest that as part of the induction process. Yes. So looking to my left, I think we'll take a note of that, because that's a good idea, Councillor Ogilvie, to include that as part of the induction process.
And looking, just as a sort of a summary, looking particularly at page 70 of the report, page 157 of our diligent, and it comes under the heading of implications. And the central part, all three items there are quite useful, but the central part says areas to keep an eye on. 1 is footpaths, 2 environmental information, 3 stormwater services, 4 public toilets, 5 cycle lanes. And these really are a lot of the items and activities where I think the community boards, the community associations really get hit with those particular items. This is where the council is, I'm not going to use the word failing, we're not quite providing the same level of service as perhaps we used to with these items. And they are, I suppose, foremost at association meetings and public meetings, et cetera, I think as a council, we should take note of that quite seriously, particularly the top 1, footpaths and public toilets. It was number 4 there. Well, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ogilvie. Councillor Turley.
Yes, I find it quite interesting looking at these results, and satisfaction with roads is good. I hope we don't sort of rest on that though. And what I'm concerned about is the detail that sits behind the steps. And, you know, I do agree that we need more toilets around the place. We've got sort of a policy for open spaces. I think it's about every 500 metres or something, but I don't see anything that relates to how far the distance should be for toilets. And I think there would be something worth looking at. It's not just the elderly, the general population do need toilets. I've nursed males with prostate problems and females with prolapses and teenagers who drink far too much in the way of high energy drinks. But they all have issues, and children with delayed development and disabilities. So, I do think it's easy to poke the finger at the elderly, and I'm in that category and I'm fine. So, yeah, so it's everybody. We don't have issues, all of us, just because we're old. So it's a general population. The other thing I'd like to point out is the cycling. 41% is not a good result of people feeling safe. That means 59% don't feel safe. And I know we're looking at our urban areas and villages, and next year we'll have cycle lanes in place. That's brilliant. But NZTA needs to come to the party and link those state highways. They're pushing people onto other modes of transport, and yet they're not providing the infrastructure to go with it. And in particular, my concern is from Hope through to Brightwater and out that way. There are people every day cycling there. There's room for cycle lanes, but they don't exist the whole length of the road. And with those big logging trucks and the volume of transport, it needs to be sorted. So these stats can be used to perhaps push some of these things. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Is there anything further? Quick one, Councillor Hill.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Just in terms of the prepaid rubbish bag service, 56%, and only 56% of respondents who are provided with a prepaid rubbish bag service use it. Do you know what that's about? You could, but you don't. And we think it's rubbish. Sorry.
I suspect there's a number of people to whom that service is available have the option of utilising a CAN plan or the many other providers of refuse collection services. And for many people, the idea of the bag and whereas CAN plan will come and collect you. So that may be one of the key options why only a certain percentage of the people who are capable, or not capable, who are able to use it or have it offered or available, choose not to use the bag system as opposed to the various other options provided by private suppliers.
It's expressed as a dissatisfaction though, isn't it? Probably the price.
It might have something to do with the cost.
Yeah.
So the cost of bags has gone up significantly.
And in terms of your point, CEO Leone, around higher levels of service will cost more. I know with the community events and programs that drop off because of COVID, it's thought, but also some of the comments about how come people don't go. That perhaps wouldn't necessarily be a cost increase to improve a type of event or who it reaches or
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Leonie, do you have a comment before I move on?
I just wanted to say to councillors, look, I think this is actually a really good result considering the year we've just had. The uncertainty in the community, what they face with COVID, You know, I think that the councillors should be really pleased with the work they've done the last year to keep these at this level. I've noticed councils have dropped significantly, some down to the 30s and 40s satisfaction, and they're providing the same services. So I think that actually, you know, that's actually really good. And I think that we're focusing on the right things. We can do better. And when you're talking about cost, Councillor Hill, I'm looking at mostly the things that won't cost anything, which is a friendly smile, you know, responding quickly, keeping our community informed. All of that doesn't actually cost us money, and that actually improves satisfaction. It's not just about throwing money at it, but yeah, I appreciate your comments around you know, the events and so forth. So yeah, I just think this is great for the whole organisation and councillors. Thank you.
Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to comment on the public toilets. I know there was a comment by a councillor earlier about the price of our toilets. Can I just say that the main cost in toilets is the maintenance and the operations of them, not the capital cost. And the cheaper the toilet you put in, the higher the maintenance and operating costs. One of the challenges with toilets, and we have this all the time, is there are sectors of our community that abuse our public toilets. And I know during the holiday period, particularly down in Murchison and around the holiday areas, we're having to go in and clean toilets, you know, 5 or 6 times a day because people do not utilise them properly. So there's a huge cost in public toilets. And if you arrive in a toilet just after somebody else has been in there and our cleaners haven't been there, you're going to have a bad experience, and that's going to come through. So we're actually monitoring our toilets all the time. And the reason why it costs $180,000 to put a toilet in place is to make sure that it's resilient to that sector of our community that wants to abuse them. So it's not a case of just putting a $10,000 toilet and saving money, because that actually has other ongoing costs. So we're constantly looking at that and trying to make sure that we keep that level of service as high as we can.
Thank you, Richard. It's been moved and seconded. Moved Councillor Ogilvie, seconded Councillor Hill. Just like from me, I think one of the very interesting things about all of this, and I'll come back to Leonie's last point, the thing that doesn't cost us anything is how we interact with people, the personal conversations, the amount that we use emails versus phone calls, all those things. Quite often I find that people's dissatisfaction or frustration or annoyance isn't driven by the outcome of something, it's how they've been dealt with. And we do, by and large, a good job, but we let ourselves down from time to time just in that component. And as was pointed out, that doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost anything to be, you know, responsive, to return calls, to get back to people quickly. It's challenging when you're under pressure and you've got a lot on, but I tend to find that a lot of what drives people's view of us is not necessarily what we're doing, but very much how we go about it. And that communication, conversation part of it is something we've just got to continually strive to get right, improve where it's not right. Because one person's dissatisfaction doesn't just impact us via them being in the survey. They talk to other people. They go to a barbecue. They go, you know, they're having a conversation. Oh, the crap experience with their council, some, you know, this, that, and that has an impact, and it just grows quite quickly. So I think that's the key thing to bear in mind. The other thing that's interesting to me is, given the massive issues we face, the complex challenges around housing, around climate change, adaptation, emissions reduction, Te Mana Otawai, water quality, we're talking about toilets and footpaths. Toilets and footpaths and roads, toilets, footpaths, roads and recycling. So over here, we've got this massive role, central government coming down the track with all these changes and reforms. We pour time, energy and effort into addressing those, meeting our statutory obligations, getting out there, having these conversations, but none of that's come through here. And I think we do have to seriously look at these questions. I know about consistency and having the same questions and all the rest of it because it builds trends, but some of the stuff isn't even kind of covered in here. And yet that is where we are increasingly spending a huge amount of our time, people's resources, money, rates, having those discussions and conversations. So for me, that's the thing that stands out from here. We're talking, and I get public toilets are important, footpaths, all those things are crucially important, but some of these bigger issues that we're having to focus on, and certainly looking forward, we're going to have to spend, or whoever's here is going to have to spend a lot more time on, needs to start to be picked up and see how the community feels about our approach, what we're doing, what we're not doing as well. So I think that's a conversation for the next council to have prior to the next survey at whatever time that gets undertaken. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. I think we'll break at this point for 15 minutes. Come back at 5 to 11. Machinery. Oh, I've lost me doohickey. Crikey. Machinery resolutions. Page 187. Lexus. Oh. Move Councillor McNamara, seconded Councillor Mailing. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Right, Chief Executive's report, Leonie.
To the Chair, for everyone, I'll take the report as read, and I do have a couple of comments, but I'll just go through those. I just wanted to highlight that we had our second Values Awards ceremony last week. Really exciting to do. Mayor Tim was there to present to the winners. These awards, sorry? Caps. Oh, he presented the cap, sorry. He did present the cap, sorry. I wonder what you were talking about. The winners were Phil Urquhart, Rob Cant, Vicky Clark and Edna Brownlee. And our Kapa Award went to Jackie Deans. These awards are rewarding staff who have shown the values of the organisation, and they're listed in the report at 3.4. It's really important that we celebrate people who are showing our values. That's the way we change culture in an organisation. And I'm really proud that these awards have been implemented as part of our regime. In 6 months' time, we'll have another one. The best part of this is that it's not the management who nominate, it is the actual staff members who nominate their colleagues. And we did one, the first one 6 months ago. This time we had 35 nominations, far greater number. I expect next time we'll get a lot more. So it's a really good feel-good ceremony. I'm really proud of all the nominees, as well as obviously the winners and runner-ups. So that was a great event. And yes, Tim did give out caps very well, actually. Did a great job. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of anything contained in Leonie's report? Councillor Greening.
Thanks, Leonie. Just a clarification question on the page 205 of the agenda, the tables on HR. And the clarification is really around, are the FTE counts establishment FTEs or just actual FTEs?
These are actual FTEs. They include fixed terms, which we've brought in to cover all some extra work that we're doing.
So it would be useful to know what the establishment FTE count should be in these teams as well, because the establishment FTE count will either be the same or higher.
The establishment would be generally lower. As I say, we do have fixed terms on top of this, which are perhaps for a year, covering off maternity leave, those types of things.
So normally you have the establishment FTE, which is, this is the maximum amount budgeted within a team. And then normally within those teams, you'll either have, this is how many FTEs we're currently carrying, which may not be the same as the establishment number, and you may have some vacancies. So I'm just trying to clarify if these are establishment FTE numbers or actual FTE numbers.
Okay, I understand. Yes, these are our actual FTE numbers that we have budgeted. Some of them are over because of the fixed term, but we do carry a lot of vacancies within that. So if you want to actually know how many people are in filled roles right now, I don't have that in front of me. So I can get that for you. But we're definitely below our FTE count in terms of filled vacant. We've got quite a lot of vacancies right now.
So yeah, I just think it might be useful to show an establishment column and then your actual FTE counts, so that you can see, oh yeah, this team's supposed to be having 61 FTEs, but currently has 59. So you get a feeling for where things are. At the moment, I can't see that in here, that's all. So if you're able to provide that in a table, that would be useful.
I can do that for you now. I can get that for you now. I can ask for that, or we can put it into the next report.
I'll just circulate it as soon as you've got it. It's useful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Further questions of anything contained in the Chief Executive's report? If not, is someone prepared to move? Move Councillor Bryant. Seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Mayor's activity update. So that's there for information. Open for any questions or comments that people have. Councillor McKenzie.
I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, just a slight correction, because the council hasn't presented Sue Rucastle with her certificate of appreciation yet, because it's in the backseat of my car.
Okay. Okay, we've presented it to you to present, but okay, thank you. Anything further? Councillor Turley.
This is really not something that's been done, but I'm just wondering if we could write a letter of thanks to Jamie White for his work in getting that statue back quickly for the Brightwater community.
Yeah, more than happy to do that. Yes, someone was just telling me before that it's both been returned and the person responsible for its removal has been found. So that is very good news. Robin and I will work on doing that. Is there anything further?
What it does do.
Councillor Mailing.
What it does do is it shows the value of CTV cameras.
Oh, well and truly.
And I know that Councillor Turley has talked about some vandalism in her area, but I think the discussion has been vandalism everywhere. And we've had an example recently in Saxon Field where we had some damage and they were able to identify the person, and I can think of a number of times. So cameras are a way of life, but they are actually helping us to protect our district. And, you know, people don't like the intrusion, but if you behave yourself, you don't have a problem. But when you misbehave, it helps us catch them.
Yeah, and I think that's why, I mean, we make a contribution towards some of those projects, but actually a huge amount of that has been done by the community groups and associations in the different communities around the district. And because all of them have taken that responsibility on, that we now have a network of cameras that the police can use in situations like this, or we have access to in terms of the vandalism of council property and reserves, etc., which unfortunately, is a significant issue for us. So I guess as we go forward, those camera systems are always going to need maintenance and upgrading, and because that just comes with the territory. And so I guess through the various funding mechanisms that we have, supporting those communities in their initial establishment and then ultimately in their upgrades and maintenance is probably going to be something we'll have to keep considering.
Been very helpful in funding.
Yeah, that's right. So the community associations have done the, I guess, the coordination or the work, but the funding that they've received is from both individuals and businesses in their communities who have made a contribution, something that needs to be recognised as well. So thank you, Councillor Turley, for noting that. I'll move that my report be received. Someone happy to second Councillor McKenzie. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. I think that now brings us to the in committee items. So someone move, we go into committee. Councillor Bryant seconded. Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So we'll just pause briefly.